This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. We've been making cheese in Wisconsin since before we were even a state, which may be one reason why we win so many awards for it. It's what happens when a whole state dreams in cheese. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt, a man on a never-ending search for the perfect pizza. This show is the audio version of the Pizza Talk YouTube series, where I engage in interesting conversations with some of the country's greatest pizza makers and other artisans. Thanks for joining me on this quest. Welcome to Pizza Talk. I'm Peter Reinhardt, and I'm here today with my special co-host, Brian Spangler, who many of you know is one of our Pizza Yodas. And Brian, I'm going to let you introduce Lee Hunzinger, our guest of today, because you guys have an interesting connection. So, Brian, why don't you set us up?
Okay. Well, I found Lee on Instagram. I don't know, it was probably 4 years ago. I was just scrolling through and I saw all this amazing work, the Strombolis, the pizza pops, and the Sicilian pizzas. So I reached out to him. I can't remember whether it was either Instagram or Facebook, and I introduced myself, and I was like, "Would you fly out? If I flew you out to Portland, Oregon, would you come out here and show me some of your tricks?" And so I bought him a plane ticket, and
I love this.
Put him up in an Airbnb, and we hung out for a whole week. And
Brian, I had never met Brian before, and he actually let me stay in his house. The second time we came.
That's right.
Yeah, so it was.
That's right. You did stay in my house. That's right.
That's right. Wow, cool. Lee, if you can turn your volume up or speak closer to the computer, because I could barely hear you. But okay, Brian, go ahead and continue that intro.
Yeah, well, it's perfect timing because they just closed the original Zoli's. There was evidently some structural issues with the building, so he was kind of in limbo at that point, waiting. So flew him out, and we spent a whole week playing around, just making all sorts of crazy stuff. The Strombolis, the Sicilians. He was having some problems with some of his formulas, so we re-engineered all the formulas. And he showed me pizza pops and the garlic knots and a bunch of stuff I had never made before, and we just became instant friends. And what a talent he is, and I've learned so much from him. And Lee, you've been making pizza your entire life since you were 13, 16 years old?
13, yeah. It's my 35th year of making pizza right now.
Right.
I wasn't great. I wasn't really good at 13, but my first pieces.
Well, you just won the Pan Pizza division in Atlantic City.
Yeah, it was
come a long way.
Amazing experience, just competing in general and all that stuff, and to actually win it. It's still kind of surreal to me.
I've got one question just to get the ball rolling, and then Brian, you just keep firing questions at Lee throughout as he tells us his story. But Lee, like a lot of the people that we've interviewed on Pizza Talk, you're an East Coast guy who somehow now is living in the West. You're in Dallas, Texas, and your pizzeria is Zoli's. How did you end up getting from the East Coast, and why from the East Coast? Why did you open in Texas?
So it's a very interesting story. When you grow up in New York, you don't ever say, "Hey, when I get older, I'm going to live in Texas." It just doesn't. It doesn't really work. And to actually have, if somebody would have told me that when I was younger, I wouldn't have believed them. And nothing against Texas. I didn't know anything about it. And, it's on the other side of, all the way south and out west here. But I actually had a friend from New York, and the interesting story is I was working. I had moved to Florida with a buddy of mine from New York that was opening a small deli/pizzeria. And I wound up working with another company about a year later. Him and I kind of separated, and I went with this other company. And they were from New York. And their next door neighbor, they had this pizzeria and very successful in Florida. Now they have a couple of locations down there, Mezzaluna Pizzeria. Their next door neighbor in New York had moved to Plano, Texas, and they wanted to open up a pizzeria. So, I mean, they were so tight with them. He actually, a good friend of mine, Vinny Ferrari, and he came to Florida to learn the business through, his old neighbors. And I was managing that pizzeria at the time. So we became really good friends. Needless to say, around the same age and a lot of the same interests, played a lot of sports, played a lot of Madden on the PlayStation. But we became really good friends, and the offer to come out to Dallas was there. And I wanted to come out a couple of months after he was open. And I met Jay Jerrier randomly, who actually happens to be here today. Came to support, but so I met Jay, and I was out here for about 2 years. I moved back home because I had a good friend that was opening a place in New York, and I stayed in touch with Jay. And we would always, at this point, he had opened Cane Rosso very successfully, and Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives episode was filmed. And long story short, he was always throwing around the idea of opening a New York style place, and he got serious. We stayed in touch, opened my friend's place very successfully, and the offer came to move to Dallas and work with Cane Rosso, the Zoli's menu, and he found the location and all that good stuff. So and I moved out here about almost 9 years ago. Yeah.
Cane Rosso is a well-known Dallas pizzeria, but did it start on the East Coast and go to Dallas, or did he open it in Dallas?
So he opened in Dallas. Deep Ellum was the original location, and then still there. We have 7 locations right now, soon to be 8 in Arlington, right near Cowboy Stadium. So hopefully sometime next month we'll be in there and cooking.
So you're part of the Cane Rosso empire as well as Zoli's, or Zoli's part of the overall?
I'm the head pizza czar, as Jay says it, or the executive pizzaiolo. Sometimes in my emails you'll see it, but so I oversee all the pizza and the bread in the company for 9 restaurants.
So Zoli's is part of the Cane Rosso empire, so to speak.
Yes, yeah.
I see.
Company. It was the saying was when we opened up Zoli's was if you hate Cane Rosso, you'll love Zoli's. You need to be educated on Neapolitan pizza, and Jay was making it authentic Neapolitan. As we know, it comes out of a 900-degree wood-fired oven. Yeah. A lot of charcoal on it, but it's not a crispy pizza. So some people were disappointed. Not many, because they did very, very well. But some people were, and there are a lot of New Yorkers down here, as they're everywhere. Everywhere I go, I seem to run into a lot. And at any rate, Zoli's opened, and this location here in Addison opened a little over 2 years ago. And with the pandemic now, things are a little crazy, but we haven't closed here. So I mean that's we closed for a couple of days, but at any rate, things are going well. I hope he opens more.
So basically, you've got this Neapolitan, series of restaurants, but you needed something that did a crisp New York style, and so you did Zoli's as sort of that other option.
Crispy New York style, crispy round pies, square pies. We do all kind of over the top type dishes. We have a cheeseburger on the menu that's always on the list of the best cheeseburgers in Dallas. Our culinary director, who's actually holding my iPad right now filming us, he came from a restaurant group with steakhouses, burgers, big restaurant group here in Dallas. So a burger was eventually going to hit the menu, and it did very successfully.
Well, I know when Brian was telling me about the work that you guys did together, one of the things he was raving about, and I'm a Philly boy, where Strombolis are one of the many great sandwiches that we know in Philly. He said you've got to have him do his Stromboli for you, because it's not like any I've seen anywhere else. So Brian, can you tell us a little bit about kind of some of the things you guys worked on together?
Well, it was a give and take. I was interested in seeing how he was doing all this work, the Strombolis I was seeing on Instagram, and he needed some help with his formulas. So he was adding too much salt, which would, I remember correctly, he was adding so much salt that he had to keep adding more and more yeast, and we realized he was at 6% salt. And I was like,
yeah,
whoa, okay, let's reel it back in.
But the bread bakers who's watching right now is like going, oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
But we got it all reeled in that week. Like, so it was a great relationship. And he showed, like, the way he does his Strombolis, and I don't know if we're doing that today, Lee, but and maybe we'll bring you back and do that another time. Is that he
I have one made
out paper thin on a stainless steel table with olive oil, like really paper thin, and then layers all the meats and cheeses in, and then basically rolls it, then pulls it back, rolls it, pulls it back, rolls it, pulls it back. So you're getting layers and layers and layers, almost like you would with Benoit Serret.
Wow. Well, I don't know if you're planning to take us all through all the steps today, but I know you got a finished version there, Lee. So for those who aren't as familiar as some of us are with Strombolis, which is essentially, I always think of as a rolled up pizza. Do you want to show us the finished, or do you want to? Are you planning to kind of walk us through the steps?
Well, I have a serrated knife here.
All right. Well, you got a serrated knife, then we've got to start cutting. We got to see it. We got to see it.
Stromboli, I made it a little earlier. It's still warm now. I score the top of it. It's rolled dough, as you can see the bottom too as well. Layered meats. Would you like me to cut into it now? Or?
Sure. And that just right from the outside looks like just a big, large loaf of Italian bread. But when you cut it, you can tell us everything that's inside it.
There we go.
All right. There it is.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it looks like Italian bread. I guess the sesame seeds aren't so traditional. If there is a traditional Stromboli, I like sesame seeds. There are a lot of jokes in the company I work for that I put seeds on everything. A good friend of mine, Gino Rago, in Chicago, likes to dig on me with the seeds, and from good heart, of course. That toasted sesame flavor of on bread to me is it's one of my favorite things. So
Audrey Sherman does sesame seeds on her grandma pie too. It's kind of like becoming a big thing.
Very nice. As you can see, the cross section here. I'll get this one here. So you can see the layers of dough. It's almost, rather than a traditional just fold over, like Brian was saying, I try to get a couple of rotations with thin dough once I have it where I want it on the table. And we'll get into that a little later. But that gives it almost like a croissant type effect to the top with a dough that wraps around it like that, and with pizza dough, of course. And in this one, I put pepperoni, Genoa salami, hot soppressata, house-made sausage, and ham.
Oh boy, that sounds like a hoagie, basically.
Ham, salami, pepperoni, sausage, and hot soppressata. So it's a little more meats than your average Stromboli, if you would. But the flavors, there's something about the way it bakes inside like that, too. I make different kinds, like all vegetable Strombolis. I started making something similar years ago at a place called Grelli's Pizza Gourmet in Farmingdale. It was Melville, big corporate power lunch crowd type area, and we would make different kinds. We had an eggplant, spinach, roasted peppers. We had a sausage pepperoni. We have meatball, onion, mozzarella, garlic. All kinds of different combinations kind of rolled up like this, and the flavors that come when they cook together and kind of mesh like that. Added with dough and a little toasted sesame flavor. To me, I always like making what I like to eat. And, I used to be a little heavier. I love to eat.
Hey, what kind of cheese do you use in that?
Whole milk mozzarella. So we actually, I put a shredded mozzarella, as most ingredients in here are sliced. Even our sausage is sliced. So they lay a little flatter. The reason why I don't use sliced mozzarella is because sometimes when you're actually rolling it up, it could not roll as even. Using the shredded allows it to mesh and form in spots that would be a little thinner. It kind of goes to those spots, and as you can see, I can get it nice, super even, the length of it. And another key is not having that big dough at the end, like that big hunk of dough. Growing up, calzones, Strombolis. If I ordered out and they weren't mine, I would seem to be a little disappointed because the product would all be in the center and you'd be left with all this dough on the outside, which is great to dip in sauce. Sometimes it's a little tricky getting that cooked. So another big thing with this Stromboli is I'll have product going pretty much to the end.
Hey Lee, would you mind doing another close up of the inside of that so that people can really
Absolutely.
see what it's like? Yeah. Holy cow! I know. Just seeing it is getting me very, very hungry, and it's bringing back all my Philly
Ham,
sort of food
soppressata,
memories. You know, it's
pepperoni. There's actually basil in there too, which I put
Oh,
a
yeah.
good amount so that it would be.
and
I like the visual of a nice green in there as well.
I
Somehow
can see
gets
what
lost
Brian
with
was talking
the
about too, with the layers, the almost
Yeah.
croissant or phyllo type layers of the surrounding it. Yeah,
And because the way he does that, it keeps
That's
the outside of that crust super crispy because you get that kind of like corrugation with that you would have with a croissant.
yeah.
And oh man, it's the best stromboli I've ever had. It's man.
Brian's first one he made was perfect, by the way, too. So
Oh,
I
Well,
remember clearly when we made them, and we ate a lot of them too. But we had made
how many of these? How many a day do you sell of these, Lee?
These typically we run as a special because they're tougher on the bill side. I do an oil base on them as opposed to some people I know like to use flour and stretch it. The oil base enables me to stretch the dough and keep it exactly where I want on the table. On busy nights, it's tough to have a spot that you're donating just to an oil base or it can get cleaned up from flour because of the high volume here too. But we run it as a special every couple of weeks. You know,
I think.
we're working on another project now where we'll actually possibly have them on the menu at all times too. They're so good too, so we have to figure out a way to make it work.
Peter, you'll love this. During Super Bowl and Christmas, he makes the strombolis into a football shape and a Christmas wreath.
Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, just seeing that just gets me very excited. And especially, again, that the layers that you get, you don't see that. This is like not your typical stromboli, but maybe for those who are already doing strombolis in your places, you can pick up some tips from this. And what we'll do is we'll take a break. And when we come back, Lee, you're going to show us your Sicilian, right?
Was planning on the Sicilian.
Okay, because I know Brian, that was another thing that Brian told me about. It says when we interview Lee, we've got to get him to show us his Sicilian because he's just like you're doing with the Stromboli. You're doing something that sets yours apart from others. So come back. We're with Lee Hunziker, Zoli's Pizza in just out in Dallas. You're outside of Dallas. You got a couple locations of Zoli's plus the Cane Rosso, Neapolitan empire. You're all part of one big group, and you're the pizza czar. Great to have you on Pizza Talk. Brian, thanks for bringing Lee to us. And we'll see you in part 2, and we're going to learn all about Lee's Sicilian. See you soon. Stick around for more Pizza Quest after a word from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. There's a reason when you think of Wisconsin, you think cheese. Cheese is a huge part of Wisconsin's history and future. In Wisconsin, the state of cheese, the tradition of cheese-making excellence began 180 years ago, before Wisconsin was recognized as a state. Immigrants traveled to settle in this lush green hills of Wisconsin, bringing their cheese-making traditions with them. These storied skills, combined with the freshest milk available, created a cheese-making culture that is uniquely Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 1,200 cheesemakers, many of whom are third and fourth generation, continue to pass on old world traditions while adopting modern innovations in cheese-making craftsmanship. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Well, we're here on Pizza Talk with Lee Hunziker, Brian Spangler. In our last episode, Lee showed us a Stromboli, a finished version. He's going to show us now very quickly how he actually makes that thin lamination rollout. So, Lee, take it away.
All right. So I'm going to make a Stromboli. Sometimes, like Brian was talking about, you make them sheet pan size. Today we're actually doing something a little bit smaller. It's about 10, 12 inches. For that, we're going to so I put a little olive oil down on the table here. Olive oil, blended oil, any kind of oil works. I don't put a lot, simply because when I put the dough down, I kind of want it to stay where I'm stretching it. The gluten is going to kind of pull back on it. And if it's a little too much oil, it does exactly that, kind of pulls back.
Yeah.
Find that happy medium.
I love seeing that technique because I'm a big fan of what I call the oil slick method also for rolling out as opposed to flour dusting because it does give you some other options. And I'm glad to see, somebody in the professional community actually doing it that way.
Yeah. So, and I'll explain more as I go along too. When I taught this to some other people, a rolling pin works really well. I'm not going to use one today, but feel more comfortable with a rolling pin getting the dough even.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend necessarily pressing it all the way out, pushing all that air out of the dough. But any kind of shortcut, sometimes won't help the final product. Rolling pin in this case, it works. I try to just use it on the end when I'm showing people. Like I said, we're not going to use it today. You don't need to use it. So, but if you are having trouble getting it even, rolling pin. For those at home, then try it out. Rolling pin will work. So I like to use the smooth part of the dough down on the table. As you can see, I opened it up. This is a 390 gram dough ball. And I'm going to use for this one here. I'm going to just put a touch more oil down. And I'm going to start opening up my dough. I'm going to flip it back and forth. Try and get it as even as I can. The dough wants to stay in these areas here because it's brown. So I'm just pulling it out, pressing down, focusing on those areas. Okay. And I'm going to flip it back in a hot second here. Now, when I make this, I try and get where I'm laying my meats at the bottom of it, okay, before I actually roll it up. I like to keep that a little bit thicker, simply to hold the product and get that initial roll with the Stromboli. And then I'll stretch the dough out super thin. So this part up top, I'm not worried about it so much being thin, as you can see this area here. Just as long as I get nice and even when it's all said and done. Once again,
it stays where you put it.
I'm focusing on these parts here. Like I said, for me, there's nothing worse than a Stromboli or a calzone where you had all bread on the end of it. I know some people like it. Maybe you dip the sauce in, but for me, it was all about the meat.
Yeah, and having every bite have pieces of the filling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And just have a consistent product throughout, whether you're cutting into the center. I do like the end of it because the cheese will kind of creep out a little bit.
Yeah.
And as you see, like when I make it, I don't actually close the ends of it completely. I'll leave them a little open so that it breathes, and then we'll score the top of it for that same as well as giving it a nice look with the score top. It also enables it to cook a little more or that heat to get to the inside.
And for those of you who think in terms of ounces, that's about just under 14 ounces of dough.
Yeah. So we're going to come, like I said, it's about 12 inches. This one is.
Okay.
I want to say 12 inches. We're right there. Okay. Now,
good.
A lot of dough wants to stay here, so I'm kind of pushing it back. This way I got it nice and level. You'll notice it a little bit thicker here than at the top. I'm just going to start to speed things up a little bit. I'm going to start that right here. You get a little hole, don't worry about it. Just pack it right up easily. I'm going to lay down my hand first. I always like rather than putting cheese first, cheese has a tendency, if you score the top, it'll bleed out of the Stromboli. The flattest meat that I'll put on here is the ham. I try to put two. This is the only one where I'll actually put two. The only meat that I'll actually put two. I'll come double layer of it. It's because I want that ham to come around the whole Stromboli.
Got it.
Full wrap with the dough.
I like that idea too. That the ham acts as a barrier in case any cheese. You don't want the cheese melting out, so this protects it.
I make a vegetable Stromboli that's pretty popular, and I do the same thing with the eggplant. To tell you the truth, I'll put it on and kind of keep things together in there. I'll put another, just fill in my gaps here. About two wide. Now between each layer, I'm going to put just a little bit of shredded mozzarella cheese. Rather than putting a bunch in the center of it or all of it at one time, I'm just going to put a little bit between each layer. like I
I
did.
think that's a great technique because I remember Nancy Silverton was telling us that in her sandwiches, that it's so important to have spacing between the meats and the cheeses and all, so that air is part of one of the ingredients.
Exactly.
Yeah, as you can see in the one that I made earlier too, it's all about that air inside. When it was packed, it was a little tighter, but you can see all the layers.
It opens up the flavors. Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. So not traditional. I know a lot of Strombolis growing up didn't have hot sopressata in them. We're fortunate enough to use it here. Connie Rosso, our wood-fired Neapolitan, we use a lot of hot sopressata.
Why not?
So we're fortunate enough to bring it into Zoli's here, and you don't see a lot of it, or I didn't see a lot of it growing up. It was the first time I actually worked with it. But it just, I think it takes this Stromboli to another level. It besides the flavor, it adds a little bit of heat.
Yeah.
Kind of get over the edge, as Jay was saying.
I know in a Philadelphia hoagie, a lot of times they'll use capicola for that particular ingredient.
Love capicola. Yeah, I mean, anything goes as far as something like this. If capicola is what you like, I recommend using that for sure. I love the sopressata. I love the colors that it brings to it too. It has that pretty vibrant red.
Right.
A lot of my cooking too, I'm looking for all the colors to make things pop. As we know, presentation is a big part of what we do, as well as obviously the taste. But a lot of times, if it looks good, it's got a good chance of tasting good as well. I put a little more cheese on there, just a tiny bit. I'm going to put some Genoa salami now. After the sopressata.
Okay. Different meats happening here. This is great. It's meat
Generous
lover.
as you want to. I kind of let them overlap a little bit.
Beautiful.
So we're going to put a little bit more. I mean, just a little bit of cheese. As you can see.
I was going to say, I'll bet another layer of cheese is coming.
Tiny bit, exactly.
It adds up, though. Each layer.
Whole basil leaves. Right, we'll roll them right in there. Basil's one of those things. For me, I can never have too much of it. I love it.
Right.
So I had actually put a good amount in that the first one that we were showing there, and it kind of gets lost in there visually sometimes, but the flavor, as we know, is fantastic. Nice. I'm not going to put cheese in this layer. It's just a little basil. I'm going to put a little of our house sausage here.
Now we're at the four meats.
Yeah. He's not stingy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put some pepperoni last.
5 meats.
So many meats. So we use here at Zoli's, we use Ezo pepperoni.
Ezo is becoming a hot brand. It seems like the pepperoni game has really kicked up in the last couple of years. It seems like pepperoni went from being sort of a taken for granted ingredient to being a artisan ingredient.
Yeah, Hormel used to be kind of the standard back in the day. Now, and
it wasn't bad. It's still not bad, Hormel, but now these guys who are experts at salumes are adding this to the repertoire.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of new companies. My old standard back in the day was Molinari from San Francisco. Yeah. And then finally Ezo, Darren, who I've become good friends with, he started distributing out here on the West Coast, and amazing product, an amazing person. So
I know, and at the Pizza Expos, Darren and his brother, they just made such a strong presence there, and I even have my Ezo hat hanging up, in the next room because
I like that one. You just sent it to me the other day.
Yeah, they've just done a phenomenal job of taking a 3-generation company and bringing it into modern times and upping everybody's game.
All right, so now I'm going to roll up the Stromboli. I got my pepperoni, so I have ham, hot sopressata, Genoa salami, some of our house sausage, and that good Ezo pepperoni on there as well.
Before you start rolling, can I ask you a question? Do you ever use fresh tomatoes or fresh onions on this, like you would say in a hoagie?
What was that?
Do you ever use fresh tomatoes or fresh onions like a hoagie?
Oh, in the show? Sure. No, I've made Strombolis that were like Big Mac. For the years we've gotten funky, and I'm making pizza.
So there's no limitations.
So downtime. No limits. We're working on a Philly cheesesteak Stromboli right now. things like that. Yeah, literally anything you can put in there.
I just like the contrast, the flavors from when you get a little tomato and also the crunch of an onion that seems to also help. Yeah, just wondering.
Yeah, no, we like I said, anything goes with Strombolis, and what I'm making now is just a meat Stromboli.
Okay.
Heavy on the meat, of course, but you can literally make any type of sandwich or Stromboli.
Got it. What was that, Brian? Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say the only thing I would have done different is get rid of that ham and use mortadella.
Mortadella's great, yeah.
Mortadella, yeah, why not? Yeah.
Brian's the one up right here.
Or keep the ham, but add the mortadella and make it a 6-speed.
No.
All right, so show us now the rolling technique. This is where you really separate from the crowd.
Okay, so it's all about that first fold, okay? So as you can see, I'm pulling the dough out a little bit. I'm going to pull it the whole length of this Stromboli, just a tiny bit, little bit. If you remember, I left this part just a little thicker than the top here at the bottom. Yeah. So now I'll pull this out a little bit, and I'm just pressing to the other side. In here, pressing.
And kind of stretching.
It doesn't have to necessarily stick, or I don't have to worry about it ripping so much too. It's going to eventually when I come back around. Just kind of forming it and getting that in. Now with the first roll, I like to kind of boat the corner like this. I'm not coming in with a lot of dough. I'm actually coming up. If anything.
But you're sealing it now. Yeah.
Yeah. Same deal with this side. I'm coming up. Now with it, I'm going to push all these toppings in. Kind of come in. And I'm going to follow through around the length of the Stromboli, kind of hitting this corner here.
You know, when Brian
I'm not worried about the ends closing because I do wind up trimming it and leaving it open a little bit on purpose.
Yeah.
So, but this is just to get it, I guess, a little bit more even. Without doing that, sometimes when I fold it, cheese will start leaking out. It's a little tighter. So now I've got that initial fold that Brian was talking about earlier. So once I get that initial fold, okay, now I'm actually pulling the dough back, coming back to the same size that I was, right, with that same dough.
Which makes it thinner. Yeah, again.
Makes it thinner.
When Brian was telling me about this, when he saw this technique, the description of it got me very excited. Now that I'm seeing you do it, every time you stretch it and roll it, I get even more excited because I can anticipate how cool this is going to be when it all comes together.
Oh, it's so good.
So now you're pulling back. All right, I'm stretching that dough, doing the same thing like I did. Now I don't have to bolt the ends as much. If you keep doing that, what you'll end up with is more like a mushroom cap on the end with a lot of dough. So I've got it where I want it. So I'm just going with another rotation. Now I'm keeping in mind that initial fold, okay, where I turned the first time. I want that to be the top of my dough. Right, I want it to be a little bit thicker on the top. I'm going to score that part.
Right. That's right. We saw those cut marks on the finished version.
Through all these rotations, I'm kind of keeping my mind with knowing which spot is going to wind up being the top. It's right here.
And would you say, Lee, that because you use that light oil rub on the bench, that oil is helping to keep those layers separate?
It's definitely helping it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, because we saw that.
It's helping this dough stick to the table and not move. Right, whereas if I had flour, it would be sliding right now. And you can see I'm pulling it so thin. You can see my hand and my glove through it. If you have something like this where it's a little too thin in that one spot, I can just kind of cheat a little bit. Now I want to finish. I'm going to wind up having one more full rotation with this ending up with my top. So pull back once again. Coming. That half rotation. Now this is where I could have this be the bottom, or you could simply just kind of trim it. I like to keep all the dough in the Stromboli, but if you're left with it a little bit thicker, you could either tuck it underneath or just kind of trim it up a little bit. Okay. Now this part that's the bottom, this is the top, and that's it. I will pinch these corners just a little bit. And the same deal. You can see product right on the inside of this thing.
Yeah.
I'm just trimming up the dough a little bit, keeping it open. as you can see there. Same here on the other side. Now you can play with it a little bit. If you have one side that's a little thicker, you can kind of pull it. This one's pretty even. I got lucky. It's not my first Stromboli. So
Yeah, right. This is not your first Stromboli rodeo. What temperature do you bake them at, Lee?
So these are baked at 500. Now, Pizza Master, I had opted to make a Sicilian pie. I'm going to actually lower it a little bit here. About 500 degrees for about 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Really well. To get the seeds, now that's another tricky part, like the seeds and the seasonings that I like to put on the top of the crust. If you're one of those people that's very traditional, of course you could just score it and roll with it like this. But I like using a little bit of egg wash. This has one yolk in it. I use 6 egg whites.
So the egg wash helps to hold the seeds on, I guess,
Exactly.
and shine it up.
Well, it gives it a nice shine, and it acts like a glue to the seeds and the other spices I'm going to put. I'm actually hitting the side of this thing.
Yeah.
On a black pan like this, it's still going to release, even if you get a little bit on the bottom. And then I got my sesame seeds here. So I'm actually going to hit my hand on purpose so that I get it on the sides. Because one thing I hated growing up, even though I made a lot of pizza, I would go out to eat a lot of pizza too. And it's one thing getting seeds on the top, but I love when they're on the side as well.
Ah, yeah.
I'll actually hit my hand so that it bounces off my hand and hits the side. Now I'm going to come this way and do the same exact thing.
That's a good technique, yeah.
So now I really don't need much, but just a tiny bit in the middle here. Whew. Okay. So this, I always like putting a little Italian spice on as well. So this is just it's a mixture of kosher salt and a little Italian seasoning. Kind of just very light sprinkling. I don't want to overdo it because, as we know, a lot of these cured meats have a lot of salt on it.
This is the everything bagel version of a Stromboli.
We actually have an everything bagel crust as well that we do here at Zoli's for a couple of pies. But and then I put a little parsley because it color, flavor, kind of makes it pop a little bit.
Nice.
And then scoring the top. I like to use a serrated knife like this. Or rather come straight across. I'm going to hold it at a bias. I'm going to come across my hand.
How deep are you going? Just through the top layer, or do you go into the meat?
Just through the top layer.
Uh-huh.
So you can actually see the meats through
Just
it.
see the meat. Yeah. Beautiful.
And that's it. Pop it in the oven.
Pop it in the oven, and then
15 minutes.
so you got about 15 minutes, and then pop it in, and then show us the finished version that you showed us in the last episode, so we can see, because we're running out of time here, so we want to see what happens when they come, what they look like when they come out.
Okay. So the finished product.
Yeah. Remember,
Like
we got
that.
this in the last episode. So another return to the inside, and you can again see the layering through that roll up, that thin roll up. You can actually see it separate almost like a croissant, and or a strudel. I think the strudel is another analogy for what this can be. Plus all that seed, the seeds on top. This is the Zoli Stromboli, created by Lee Hunzinger. And thank you so much for showing this to us. Brian, thank you for telling me to ask Lee to do this for us, because you brought it to my attention and you got my juices going here, because now I want to get on a plane and either come down to Dallas or go to Philly and get myself a real Stromboli. Lee, thanks so much. And we're going to see you in another episode. You're going to show us how to make your famous Sicilian pie, or your square. So thanks so much. What's that?
He won the pan division at in Atlantic City.
So I wasn't kidding when I said famous, because this is an award-winning Sicilian. Of course, Sicilian made by a New Yorker living now in Texas. So we're all over the globe. And thank you. We'll be right back with more Pizza Quest right after this break. We're with Lee Hunziker at Zoli's, and in this episode, he's going to show us his award-winning Sicilian. I'm with Brian Spangler of A Pizza Shoals in Portland, Oregon, who is a good friend of Lee's. And Lee, I just want you to take it away and show us how you do it.
Okay. So I actually have one of the pies actually baking right now. So in the middle of this, I gotta kind of go tend to it. But the name of the pie is actually the Dope Soap. It was the Caputo Cup winner this year. So on the build side, it has some hot sopressata. Basically a Sicilian pie with hot sopressata. As it's almost done here. We're gonna let it go for another 2 minutes. So yes, yeah, short for sopressata.
Got it.
And when it's finished, it'll get some whipped regatta, hot sopressata marmalade. So we'll make a jam out of the sopressata,
Nice.
and which is a real cool post oven type topping, and just some fresh basil on there. So it's like sopressata two ways. Like you get when sopressata bakes on a pie, that flavor kind of concentrates the saltiness and a little bit of heat as well, and that great cured salami, spicy salami type flavor, and then the jam is on the sweeter side. So it's salt, sweet, and the regatta kind of cools things off. I have a Sicilian pie that I made a little earlier here, kind of finished. This is just our straight pie, which we happen to our plain cheese, which is actually called the Spangler. It's an ode to Brian. Yes, both our round and square cheese pies are called the Spangler, named after Brian.
And now, what did Brian do to earn this honor? I've always wanted to go in a restaurant and put my name on the wall as like one of the dishes, but I didn't ever happen. But how did you get one?
So my higher learning on dough, like pre-ferment, stretch and folds, was through Brian. And when I first met Brian, right before I had met Brian, and he told his side of the story, but I didn't kind of tell mine, was like, I had just seen an episode on TV where it was Pizza Paradise. I believe it was the Travel Channel, and it was 4 different or 5 different pizzerias across the nation. Some real incredible pizza on that show, and Brian's segment, he was talking about dough, and he had a batch dough mixing, and he says, not that people don't know how to make dough, they don't know what's happening. And he basically described me. He's like, I always made really good dough, but I really didn't know what was going on. I knew what I had to put in there, but Brian broke things down, and for me, put things in layman's terms as well. And for me, it's been like an addiction, pre-ferments and stretch and folds, and it's what we do with our dough here. I have some square pie dough here. That's actually going to be
that ability that Brian has to do that is one of the reasons why he is one of our pizza yodis that we feature regularly here on Pizza Talk, because he understands both the craft and the science.
Yes, and I was fortunate enough to have Brian contact me like he said, and he was interested in learning Sicilians. And let me just grab a pan real quick. Sorry, guys.
Oh, I'm so
happy. I was fortunate to have him reach out to me, and my gosh, has it changed my life. It was at the perfect time when I met him, and I'm real grateful, because not only did I learn about dough, Brian is a mentor to me in many ways. He's a great friend. He's always there for me, and like a brother. I have 2 brothers, and I have 3 now actually with Brian. So nice. I love him to death.
Love you, man.
And I can't thank him enough for what he's done for me in pizza. If I somehow help him out, that's amazing. Because
we're going to have to change the title of this episode and call it the Bromance episode.
The Bromance, exactly. Well, a lot of people ask, they'd be like, how'd you meet Brian? And honest, the story is really cool, and I mean, we hit it off right from the get-go. And we talk every week, if not a couple of times a week, just saying hello and seeing what's happening. So it's a friendship that I cherish.
Is that one of the Spangler pies right in front of you then, the one you just pulled out? Is that what you would call a Spangler?
So
No, well, this is our. It just has right now is a Spangler with soppressata. So it's our plain cheese Sicilian pie with added soppressata on there as well.
So when
I'm
people
going to
come
build.
into Zoli's, when they want what we would call in the East a Sicilian style, they ask for the Spangler, and then they can top it with other things.
Yeah, he calls it the Spangler because my favorite pizza is just a plain cheese pizza. So at Zoli's, whether it be a square or a round, and I feel honored to be on their menu, their cheese pizza is called a Spangler. And then you can add whatever you want on top of the Spangler.
Got it. Spangler Plus.
Yes, exactly. So we have on our menu a list of specialty pizzas, and they're all offered on a round or a square pie. Round being 14-inch, square 12 by 12. So our plain cheese is whether it's round or square is the Spangler.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah.
So
you just wants a pepperoni pie, it'd be a Spangler with pepperoni.
So you have a par bake. Do you use a par bake crust when you make your Spangler Sicilian?
I do. I have one here. I wanted to show you too. So what we do is we stretch out the dough about 4:00 in the afternoon, and then we let it proof overnight at room temperature.
Wow.
And you can see the bottom. So when we come in the morning, God willing, the dough is we have each one individually wrapped, plastic wrapped, and we have them stacked in big stacks like that. And so God willing, like I said, it has plastic wrap on it, and if that dough is kissing it, they're ready to cook off. Once our ovens come to temp, we bake them off in the morning, and then we're ready to rock. We do a higher temp for our par bake. We par bake at about 650, which is higher than I know a lot of people are using, with some bottom heat too, a little more bottom heat than top, just to get that oven spring. Our final bake is at about 540 for about 12 minutes. So it's super light and airy in the middle, and these dough balls, they look really big, but I mean, as you can see here, it's a lot of air in them with the stretch and folds, and these are only 550 grams each. So it's roughly a little less than 4 grams per square inch on our square, but we get a lot of action through fermentation and flavor, of course.
So we're talking about almost 19 and a half ounces of dough. But basically what I'm doing is when he says grams, being a person who kind of thinks both grams and ounces, I want to hear ounces. So I divide it by 28.35, the number of grams, and that gives me the same number in ounces.
Nice.
So are you still using mashed potatoes in that dough?
So we don't do that here. For the competition, the Caputo Cup, I put 10%. I used roasted Yukon Gold potatoes that was in the dough. So
wow.
We don't do it for our everyday. We actually make one dough here. We don't make a separate Sicilian dough. We have one dough that is for our round pies, for our square pies, for our garlic knots, for our Stromboli. It's a bread dough recipe. So it's pretty ambidextrous, I guess, if you could say, or
one side
versatile. Yeah, it's
Were
one
you
dough.
able to ride that Caputo Cup victory to Italy? Did it take you to Italy to compete over there?
I had plans to. Unfortunately, it was canceled due to COVID. I was going to compete in Naples, so I had everything kind of locked in for that. And I was selected to the World Pizza Champions team, Tony Gimignani's team, which is the jacket I'm wearing now. So it's the first time I'm actually wearing this, so it feels pretty cool. Dream of mine.
Tony.
Definitely a dream come true. And I mean, he's amazing. And I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of the team members and spending time with them and traveling, competing.
So will this
really
this year carry over then to next year's competition when they bring it back? Will you be able to go over and compete with this pie then?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful.
Whatever the next one is, I'm definitely in.
Well, we want to follow that when you get over there. We want to hear how you do it and get you back on. Tell us how it went.
I would love that.
So let's go back to your pie. Is there more that you want to show us about assembling?
So why don't we do the build and then I'll come back and do the finish on the dope. So on the build side, as you can see, I have my par bake here. A little light. We oil the pan with a little olive oil, not much. As you can see, this isn't a puddle of olive oil, and I don't like to have really a greasy pie. We do want it to be nice and crispy, and we don't want it to necessarily deep fry in the pan. So just a little bit, and then on the top. We when we stretch them out, and I actually stretched out some earlier this morning to show you. So we'll stretch them into the pan. And as you can see, I got a clear plastic wrap on there with space for it to rise. But we brush pizza sauce on the top of it rather than putting a full ladle on there. I like having sauce on it, and most of our pies do have sauce, and it helps the sauce on the build. It helps it mesh with the pizza a lot better, as well as when it comes to the par bake, that plastic wrap is coming off. It's going directly to the oven, as opposed to trying to put sauce on it when it's super risen and tender and risk, denting it or it deflating or something like that with all that air.
Got it.
So on the build side, our red sauce pies, we use whole milk shredded mutts. So I have some here, and we use Stanislaus tomatoes with just some fresh herbs in there. I use three ounces. We'll kind of put on the bottom. This is a 12 by 12 square pie, and you can see some of the herbs a little chunky in there. So I won't come flush with the sauce. I'll leave about an inch around the outside. The reason being is I'll put mozzarella directly, and it'll be flush to the edge, and hopefully have some creep into the side to get like sort of a frico crust. When sauce creeps in there, in my experience, it kind of burns a little bit, and when cheese gets in there, it's all good. So we like to leave a little space, not too much, and then with the cheese, I'll go directly to the side of the pan. Now, as you saw in the other one here, when I stretch them, there's a thin crust around the outside that I kind of pull up, but not a lot. And the reason being, when it does rise up, I don't have that lip of a crust here. It's a matter of preference. Some people like it. For me, I'd rather have something that was completely level and then go flush with the cheese. So that was our goal here with Zoli's, is to not necessarily a frico crust, but cheese does creep around the edge.
Yeah.
That's what we want. So I'll come flush with the cheese. And with this cheese, we don't go heavy. I have some guys that'll go a little bit heavier, and we like to be able, when the pie's actually cooked, to still see some of the red in there as well, and just create that balance with cheese and sauce. So I have some shredded cheese on after my sauce, and then we put sauce on top of the pie as well.
Oh.
Like so. And I'll go around the outside of it and just put little, maybe about 1/4 ounce kind of blotches around the pie.
Interesting.
And the reason why one of the reasons why we use shredded is this sauce kind of stays where it is on the pie.
Yeah.
And if I use sliced cheese on there, it will kind of slide to the lowest part, kind of sink in there. With shredded cheese, it kind of sticks right where it is. But what I like in a Sicilian pie, I always like the saucy pie. There was a place on Long Island growing up that, I would go on my days off to get their marinara pizza because it was fantastic, and I just like
Remember
saucy
the name?
pizza.
You want to give them a shout out?
It was called Emilio's in Comac, and a buddy of mine and I, we would go, and I don't even know if they're still open. I think they are.
Anybody's watching this who's been to Emilio's, write to us write to me at peter@pizzaquest.com and let me know.
But they're Sicilian with and their pizza was good. The food was really good. I've gone there a bunch of times and sat down, and we would go for their marinara pie. It was just simple red sauce, a little bit of garlic, had some Parmesan on there, or Reggiano, or Pecorino, and fresh basil. So good, so good. They used a really good plum tomato on there. So for me, I something that has a lot of dough in it, I always think that it should have proper amount of sauce to attain that balance. For me, there's nothing worse than a dry Sicilian where you're just tasting the dough and finding that balance is very important in any pizza, really. So this would be my build right here. For the dope soap, we put a little hot sopressata on there. And we'll take whole pieces.
You love that sopressata, don't you?
I do.
Is that the Mastro?
It's good stuff. Like I said, we didn't use it growing up. This is the Maestro brand as well, Calabrese. So a lot of New York style pizza. When growing up, we didn't use sopressata. So now, fortunate enough to, I was introduced to it more so and using it every day at Cane Rosso, our wood-fired Neapolitan restaurant. And
we use it here. We have it on a bunch of pies as a special. We do sell a lot of it.
Am I
Now
wrong
I'm
in
just gonna
thinking
put.
that the sopressata is kind of like the original pepperoni? The pepperoni was kind of modeled on the sopressata. Would you say?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I don't know the history of it, but I would have to think. You know, I would try and explain to people, you know, sopressata as to pepperoni. We just say it's like really good pepperoni and a little spicier. I don't know, you know, not as much fat kind of renders off of the pie. It gets crispy, and in our case, with a longer bacon, these pies it gets crispy almost like a bacon would, and the flavor kind of transforms into something that's just fantastic. You know, it's got that little heat too. Not too much, but just enough to, so you taste it.
So then it just goes in the oven at this point, or do you add anything else?
So this would be it. On, you know, sauce, cheese, little hot sopressata. We put a little parsley on there.
When
We throw it in the dough soap.
You put it on now. I see it. Okay.
Oh, I have it on now a little bit, and a little pecorino romano as well, and then it goes in for a bake, about 12 minutes.
The nice thing is the crust is already baked. It's par baked, so you don't have to wait 20 minutes for it. It's coming out in 12.
That was initially when we started talking about doing a square pie, we knew we had to do something with a par bake simply because in the volume that we were doing, we needed something that was a 10, 12, 15 minute, you know, pickup time as opposed to 20, 25. New York, growing up in New York, for me, it was like everybody made a Sicilian, but the really good ones were few and far between. You know, we would drive to get them and we'd be like, oh, here for the Sicilian. So that was something I always wanted to do, was to make a really good Sicilian. And something I always worked on. You know, this wasn't something I made.
Things to do.
Sorry?
I say you can check that off your list of things to do to make a great Sicilian, because you've now made an award-winning Sicilian.
Thanks. Yeah, it's. I mean, that's still surreal, like I said too. And
do you finish?
That being said,
with any kind of anything else after they come out, or is it ready?
So I actually have one here that had just come out. All right. So let me cut it first.
Okay.
And then I'm going to put the post oven toppings on this thing.
That's great.
Cool. The dope soap, if I can get the towel off there. There's a polymer board here where we cut our pies. This is a true square, so we're going to go right into 9 with this.
9 squares.
It's not as crispy now. This one has been out of the oven for a hot minute.
Right.
Okay.
Get a really nice dark caramelization around the edges. And some of the cheese kind of rolling down the side too and giving you like a frico?
Exactly. I mean, that's the goal. This one, maybe not so much. But we try, like I said, we definitely go flush to the end as well. So now, like, if this was a pickup on one, like, you know, on our Expo line, it'd be cut like this. And then we're putting some whipped regatta. We use the Grande brand, Sopa Fina, that we season up with some fresh herbs. And it's whipped up, super creamy. So this takes that spicy sopressata and kind of cools it off a little bit.
Create some flavor contrast.
For sure, and it actually acts like a bed for the hot sopressata marmalade that I'm going to be putting on here. Great. So this is, you can get a close up on this. When we make a jam, there are some red onions, some roasted jalapenos in there as well to give it more of a jam consistency. Besides the sugar, a little sherry vinegar. I'm just going to put this.
You make that, Lee? Is it like a long, slow cook?
Sopressata, the marmalade takes about 25 minutes, I would say.
Okay, that's not,
we have to render some of the fat off initially. Otherwise, it you'll have a lot of fat kind of on the top after it cools.
So in addition to the onions, everything, there's some chopped sopressata in this marmalade.
Oh, this is all sopressata right there.
Oh my God!
All those red chunks.
What do you think, Brian? That's like sopressata on top of sopressata.
I've had it. It's really good.
Yeah, and it looks awesome.
Put a little fresh basil because we love basil.
And it kind of makes this pie pop a little bit with the white and the red and the green on there.
Green. Yeah.
And that's it. We don't put any extra Parmesan on post oven. It's just a simple ricotta, soppressata jam, and basil.
And this is the pie. Is this the pie you won the Caputo Cup with?
It is. This was the winning pie.
The dope soap.
So it was just an amazing experience going there and competing. And
Lee, would you do one more favor for me before we run out of time? Could you hold up a square and show us kind of the structure of the dough itself?
Absolutely. Well, I got one here. I got the dope soap as well. Here we go. I mean, you could see. Let's say this one actually is better here.
Because this is an area with Sicilians, I think, where there's a lot of different opinions about how tight or open the crust would be. There seems to be movement.
It's hard to see because this one has kind of sunk in a little bit.
Yeah, like almost like a ciabatta. And then in the old style, I think the way I remember, like an L&B spumoni, it's a very tight, almost like cream of wheat, structure. And so there's a full range of structure. But right now it seems like
it's hard to see with there we go.
There you go.
With a lot of the cuts, the cheese and sauce kind of sunk on and was masking the crumb on it. But
still,
not
like
super open crumb.
It's a lot of air.
It's a hydrate. Yes, all air, and our dough is hydrated about 65%. It's not super high hydration, but
a long fermentation. You do overnight fermentation at room temperature, which is amazing. So you're talking about 12 hours or so.
Rather than pushing it in a proofing box, which we do sometimes. I mean, shit happens, so to speak. So it's like sometimes if we're going through that many and we have to stretch them in the morning and we want to have them ready by the afternoon, we'll put it in a proofer like I have here. We have some garlic knots in there now. We run the proofer at about 105 degrees, high humidity, and just let it let the yeast activate and flourish like that. But it's doing it overnight with that slow rise overnight enables us to, number one, not cook them premature. Some of the guys, if we're in a rush or you're going into dinner time, you got to get them cooked off. It just enables us. And some mornings we come in and they're not ready, and we'll wait till 10:30, 11 o'clock to bake them before we open. So, it works out really well for us, taking advantage of the clock that way.
Well, what I love seeing is as we've been doing more and more of these episodes of Pizza Talk, we're seeing so many different ways that people approach their doughs, and they all work to, everyone gets there in a different way. And now that you're showing us a whole new technique that I'm loving, and the nice thing to know is that this technique is not only new, but it was recognized, at the Caputo Cup as the gold medal winner. So I think which usually means that a lot of other pizzerias are going to start to, try to implement and copy some of these techniques that they're learning here today. So Lee Hunzinger, thank you so much for being with us on Pizza Talk, and for showing us your Stromboli, for showing us your Sicilian. Brian Spangler, thank you for bringing Lee to us and for your work up at Pizza Shoals. And we want to get you back. We'll have you back in the future. And congratulations on everything you've done. Best of success.
Thank you so much, Peter.
In this navigating through the COVID era, and for everything you guys are doing down in Texas. We'll see you hopefully on another episode of Pizza Talk, Lee. And thanks for being with us today.
I hope so. Thank you, Peter. Thanks, Bry.
Love you, brother.
Love you, bro.
Pizza Quest is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org, and connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a non-profit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, and more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please Join the HRN family by becoming a member. Thanks for listening.